Hey everybody, this is Joey Zero, and today we're going to be starting a new series on Acegames Academy about WoW lore, or more specifically about racial lore. We're going to be going through each race one by one, kind of playing through the starting zone, and giving you an idea of the lore behind the character that we're playing. Kind of give you a sense of how the character fits into the world, why they'd be interested in, the storyline, things like that. I know that when I was first starting out, I didn't really have an idea about any of this, and it would have been really helpful if somebody had explained this to me, rather than me just kind of jumping into it, going with the flow, not really knowing any of the story behind it. So if you're not really all that knowledgeable about the lore, then I suggest you watch through the video, go back and watch the intro cinematic, and kind of see if it makes a little more sense, if it kind of gives you a better idea of where your character's coming from, a lot more like what Blizzard had intended. So as you can clearly see, we're going to be starting out with the Blood Elves, and without further ado...
The past few years have seen unprecedented changes within the eternal land of kael'thas. The Blood Elves, following the will of their crazed leader kael'thas Sunstrider, channeled dangerous, chaotic magics to transform their sacred Sunwell into a gateway of unspeakable evil. While kael'thas and his demonic masters were eventually defeated, a different kind of transformation occurred within the Sunwell itself, as a dying Naru sacrificed its life essence to reignite the Sunwell into a fount of holy energy. Now, the Blood Elf regent lor'themar sees a new hope on the horizon for his people. Over time, the Sunwell's light could cure the Blood Elves of their cursed state, but many still cling to the arcane powers they've procured and are hesitant to relinquish them. As one of the remaining Blood Elves, you must fight to protect kael'thas and help redeem the soul of your ancient people.
Okay, so I guess we're just kind of gonna jump right in here. The Elves were originally introduced in Warcraft 2. They were part of the Alliance. Back then they were known as the High Elves, and it wasn't known at this point, but they were originally descended from the Night Elves. I won't really go into it all that much, but the Night Elves kind of caused a whole bunch of drama because they got addicted to magic back in old school Kalimdor. They caused a whole bunch of problems, broke the one continent into all the different continents that you see today, and they kind of took a step back and said, whoa, we're kind of addicted to magic, we should probably stop. Well, a small group of them didn't want to stop using magic, and they protested. So they were exiled from the Night Elves, and as they left the Well of Eternity, which was their kind of the source of their sustenance, their immortality and everything. And as they left, they got shorter and their skin got pale instead of blue. Their hair color changed. Now, at the time, Night Elves were really into worshipping the moon, or Elune, known as the moon goddess. And when the High Elves broke away, they started worshipping the sun, which is why you see a lot of references to sun and sunlight and daytime in a lot of the names. For example, kael'thas Sunstrider. He was the leader of the Blood Elves. We'll get into that in a little bit, but that's a really common theme that you'll see, and that's why. It's basically rebellion against their Night Elf ancestors. After they broke away, they moved from the continent of Kalimdor over to what's known as the Eastern Kingdoms. They landed around Lordaeron in what's known as Tirisfal Glades, and they were going to settle there because they were looking for land that had really nice energy that they could use for all the magic that they were still addicted to. But they landed there, and a whole bunch of them went crazy, and they decided to move somewhere else. So they moved to what is their homeland now, which is kael'thas. That's what we're looking at right now, is Eversong Woods. They fought off the trolls to kind of secure this land and made it really nice and safe. They set up some barriers so that they could safely use their magic, and everything was nice and copacetic here for a couple thousand years. After landing here, they made an alliance with men and decided that they would help teach men how to use magic in assistance in fighting off the Amani trolls. So they settled here, lived here peacefully, set up their kingdom, and that lasted for a couple of thousand years until the orcs started invading, started attacking the humans, and of course the humans, since they were in an alliance with the elves at the time, decided to try and recruit them to help try and fight off the orc invasion. They fought alongside the humans back and forth a couple of times, until eventually the Burning Legion invaded. This is a whole bunch of demons, a whole bunch of baddies that originally caused all the problems for the Night Elves. You may remember this as the plot of Warcraft 3. Eventually, the Death Knight leader of the undead, kael'thas, basically invaded, beat down the doors, and stole their Sunwell, which is kind of the source of their magical energies at the time. Now, the elves did their best to fight them back, but eventually they just couldn't hack it, and they were defeated horribly. As kael'thas invaded, he and his undead just ripped this huge scar up to, the main gates, and through the main gates, and through the city, up to the Sunwell. And that scar is still there today. The ground is so tainted that undead are still just constantly rising from it and causing problems, and you can actually see it in the starting zone. And that's one thing that actually got me really excited when I found out about it, because that's some story from Warcraft 3 that you can actually see really clearly today. In fact, if you look over here, you can see one of the meat wagons, which was actually a unit in Warcraft 3. It's like destroyed and in a pile of rubble, but it's still there, and I love the tiny little things like that. Now, their king was killed, but their prince, whose name is kael'thas Sunstrider, you may have heard that name before, he was away studying magic in one of the human cities that was kind of devoted towards magic, that was known as Dalaran. When he came back and he found his homeland and his people in ruins, he gathered them all up. He changed their name from the High Elves to the Blood Elves out of respect for the dead, and was hell-bent on getting revenge, and started trying to fight alongside the Alliance against the Burning Legion and kael'thas and everybody. Because he was so zealous, he paired up with the Naga, which gave the humans more than enough cause to just exile them and leave them for dead. Now, at the time, most of the Blood Elves were on this campaign, and the only way they could survive was to escape to Outland. Now remember, they were still horribly addicted to magic at this point. They were going through withdrawals, and kael'thas needed something to keep his people going. So when they retreated to Outland, they kind of decided to serve Illidan in order to feed off the magic of demons, to kind of quench their thirst for magic. Now, kael'thas, in his hell-bent for revengeness, decided to serve the Burning Legion. Now, of course, during WoW, during the expansion for that, the Burning Crusade, that was when we invaded Outland, we fought off Illidan and kael'thas, and eventually we ended up killing kael'thas. Now, there's kind of some twists and turns in kael'thas' death there. I'm not going to get into it all that much because I don't want to spoil the story for you too much. But after his death, lor'themar Theron became the steward of the throne, basically. Now, he's their current leader, and you can actually find him and talk to him in Silvermoon City today. So what are some key points to take away from this? Their homeland was destroyed by a Death Knight, so if somebody's RPing, it may be understandable if they harbor a little bit of resentment towards Death Knights in general, or if they're a little uneasy around them. They've been fighting off the Amani trolls for thousands of years, so some people interpret this to mean that they harbor a grudge against all trolls, but realistically, the Darkspear trolls, the playable trolls, those don't really have anything to do with the Amani trolls, so the Blood Elves don't really have any good reason to, start a scrap with them or anything like that. Blood Elves were horribly addicted to magic. Some of them still are. That's basically the thing that made them as a people. So most of your high status jobs and stuff like that are going to be casters. Casters typically are going to have a higher place in society than your non-caster classes. So if you're role-playing, it's important to remember that a mage may have a higher social status than a rogue, who's basically the bottom of the totem pole. Now, one other thing I'd like to point out is the fact that paladin abilities and everything come from, they use an energy known as the light, which was basically taught by these aliens called the Naru. I won't get into that a whole lot, but they kind of captured one and stole its energy and learned how to use it, and that's kind of how they became paladins. Now, most races usually only come to this knowledge if they're granted this knowledge by, say, like a deity or some being that already understands the light. But no, Blood Elves stole it. They took it from an alien. So yeah, I think that just about wraps things up. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the notes below, and I'll try to answer them in later videos. And definitely stay tuned for the rest of the series. I'm really excited about it, and I hope you guys are too. Once again, my name is Joey Zero, and if you'd like to see more, feel free to check out the channel at Acegames Academy, or my channel, which is youtube.com/liquidshadows99.